Welcome back to another episode of Football Fanatic, in which I discuss the most interesting topics across the world of football. And in a week in which the European Championships just kicked off, I thought what better way than to come here and discuss my big three main takeaways from the first match day of the European Championships, including Spain overcoming Croatia with relative ease in a way that we've never really seen them do before, England putting us to sleep once again, as well as arising the question whether Phil Foden can actually play with Jude Bellingham, and last but not least, Julian Nagelsmann's cooking up something really tasty at Germany. Let's get right into it. We're going to start off with Spain, and Spain came out 3-0 victors over Croatia in very compelling fashion. And frankly, this was a Croatia team that lacked any real ideas, any real invention, and they didn't really have any spark. We know how ball dominant Spain liked to be. Throughout the European qualifiers, they averaged 65.2% possession. That's the second highest across all the groups in the qualifiers. Yet, if you were to watch this game, you wouldn't believe that Spain were so insistent on having the ball. They had 47% possession, less than Croatia, in fact, yet they came out 3-0 victors. This is a Spain team that, from what I watched and from what I've seen in parts and parcels of this team, they're not obsessed with having the ball, especially if they're playing against a good team, whether it's in Italy or France or Portugal. They're not obsessed with having the ball because they know that they can hurt you going the other way. This is a Spain team that has Lamine Yamal. They have Nico Williams on the wings. They're able to actually go direct. They won't just play around and keep the ball for the sake of keeping the ball. If they see an opportunity to spring forward, they're going to spring forward. And that bore fruit for them because in this game, 2 of Spain's goals came off of transitions of them winning the ball high up the field. And as we saw it throughout the game, this Spain team is so young, so intense. They're constantly trying to win the ball back as soon as they win it. Something that we saw throughout that golden generation with Iniesta and Xavi. They're always trying to win the ball back as quickly and as high up the field as possible. And it makes sense because in transition, they can kill you. This is a team that can play the ball in the central areas. They can play with Pedri, they can play with Fabian, with Rodri, but they can also play it out wide and tell Lamine Yamal or Nico Williams to take their men on 1v1. They can play out wide, they can play through the center. The Spain team has got a lot of tricks up their sleeve, and it's very good to have these because in the international competition, you're going to need to bring these things out in games that may not be going your way. And it was interesting to see because Croatia didn't even play a bad game. Spain came out strong, they came out fast as you'd expect from a young side. And then Croatia started to come back into the game. You saw the experience kind of shine through in Croatia. But then in kind of a 15-minute span, Spain completely took the game away from Croatia with 3 moments of brilliance. And it was 3-0 and it was game, set, match by halftime. And that was the most interesting thing to me because it wasn't as though Spain had played their way through Croatia's defense. It wasn't as though Spain had completely ripped Croatia's defense to shreds. They had 3 moments of brilliance and they took advantage of every single one. Of course, Lamine Yamal continuously causing threats for Vardio, who I actually thought was going to pocket him. Like Vardio, I have high expectations of Vardio. I see Vardio as a very, very incredible defender. So for Lamine Yamal to kind of give Vardio that much problems throughout the 90 minutes, I was really impressed to see that. This kid, I told you guys in my Football Fanatic video a few months ago, forget the fact that Inter Milan completely crashed out literally the round as I made that video. Lamine Yamal, this kid is special, man. This kid is going right to the top. Throughout the game, taking on his men, creating chances, got an assist for Carvajal. Him and Carvajal look to have a very interesting dynamic going on there. When one goes out wide, one comes inside, as you see with many fullback winger partnerships. The same on the left side with Cucurella and Nico Williams. So much pace on the wide areas. As I said before, you've got Pedri playing in that 10 position, Fabian, who's the conductor next to Rodri, who's picked up an injury, and it could be, I haven't seen the extent of the injury, but if that's a long-term injury and it might lead to him missing many games, that's going to be a huge blow for Spain. Huge blow for Spain, as well as Alvaro Morata, their top goal scorer. He always turns up in these tournaments. If that's a big injury, that's also going to be a big blow for them as well. It'll be interesting to see how they play against an Italy team who surprised me. In the first game of the tournament, they really surprised me with how quick and strong and intense they were against Albania, especially after going 1-0 down so quickly. So it'll be interesting to see how they set up. Will they surrender possession and allow Italy to play and try and hit them on the counterattack, knowing they have people like Lamine and Nico, or will they try and control the game themselves, but then leave themselves susceptible to people like Chiesa? It's going to be interesting to see. I think the Spain team is definitely one to watch out for. I don't think people are taking too much account of them. I think people are actually underestimating them, which is not something you should be doing. This team has a lot of very good quality. And to an extent, they actually kind of run like a club side, which is not something you see very often in national team football, a team that looks like they train with themselves every single week. Something to look out for. And a little thing on Croatia. I don't think this loss should be a huge blow to them because, as I said before, it didn't even feel like a 3-0 defeat for Croatia. Luka Modric was completely invisible. I think his time is kind of running out at the top level. He can't play 90 minutes. Maybe if it's to have an impact here and there, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe. But for 90 minutes, he just looks like his legs are not there. And especially against the Spain team, who are so intense in the midfield, it was always going to be difficult for him to conduct the game as he usually likes. It's a flattering result, if I'm being very honest. 3-0, it did not feel like a 3-0 game. But at the same time, too, Spain were much better than Croatia. So it's a tricky one. I don't think Croatia should look too down on themselves. I think they could definitely pick themselves back up in the next game against Albania. And I wouldn't be surprised if they went on to beat Italy either. From high-fiving Spain, we move on to boring as ever England. I have a huge problem with England. Before I even start talking about them, I hate how this team come into every single tournament with incredible hype, with all the propaganda, with all the talk, all the support, and then they play like this. They play like this in almost every single tournament. The last Euros, throughout the group stages, they were boring. They don't do anything interesting. They have some of the best players on the planet, yet they play some of the worst football at these tournaments. But that's neither here or there. That's not what we're here to be talking about. To be fair to them, I will give it to them. In the first half, they were very good. They came out of the blocks. They were strong. They were very good in transition. They were able to control the game. Declan Rice marshalling that midfield area. Trent Alexander-Arnold was pinging balls. They had a good first half. Bukayo Saka was taking on his man, getting past his man every single chance he get. But alas, those good performances were good. Jude Bellingham as well. But the main person I wanted to talk about, who kind of illustrated England's performance as a whole, was Phil Foden. Now, there's been a lot of discourse about Phil Foden's performance. Why can this guy not perform for England? He's incredible for Man City, but for England, he's just not cutting it. Now, before anybody comes here and tells me that Phil Foden is a system player, please pause the video and leave. Thank you very much. We're not going to condone that here. If you think that Phil Foden is a system player, I don't know what to tell you. Throughout the season, he showed that he's not. I saw Cesc Fabregas blaming Phil Foden for his performance, while Micah Richards was saying that it's the tactics, it's the players around him. And to an extent, I agree with Cesc Fabregas and I disagree with Micah Richards, because in these sort of tournaments, especially international tournaments where there's so much jeopardy, things are at stake, you yourself need to tell yourself as a player that I'm going to come out here and I'm going to perform. We saw Bukayo Saka do it. We saw Declan Rice do it. Whether you like him or not, we saw Jude Bellingham do it. The taunting, the strutting, the way in which you talk to other players, the hyping up of the crowd. If you don't like Jude Bellingham, whether you like him or not, this guy lives for the big moments. He lives for the big games. And in this game, he performed. Whether the tactics of the manager is rubbish or not, at the end of the day, you're the one playing the football. International football is not as constrained as club football, in which you have so much contact with your manager. To an extent, the manager is sending you out to play your own game. And Phil Foden is one of the most talented players in the England squad. So I kind of agree with Cesc Fabregas on the account that he has to take responsibility for his own performance. Now, I'm not saying that Phil Foden is not better than Bellingham. Actually, I believe that he is. But Phil Foden was lifeless in this game. Of course, we can talk about the tactical side. And I could do that. I could make a completely separate video on that, about how Serbia were defending the narrow spaces because they knew that's where all of England's dangerous players were, or the fact that Phil Foden had to go out wide because, just as I said, Serbia were defending narrow. So then Phil Foden is out wide, which is not a place he can really make much output or have an impact on the game. The fact that Kieran Trippier is a right-footed left back, is a right back playing at left back, so there's no cover on the left side, there's no width being held on the left side, which means defenders can essentially, as I said, just defend the narrow areas because they know that nobody's going to go on the outside. There's no threat going the other way. So there's nobody to actually relieve pressure from Phil Foden. They can just hone in on him, Bellingham, Kane, whoever is in that central area. And that's essentially what happened. But that's neither there or there. Forget tactics. Perform. If you're playing in these sort of tournaments, you're coming into these moments, you have to perform, you have to show. I believe it's better to actually have a bad game than it is to be anonymous. Phil Foden was anonymous. It's better for you to actually put in effort and things don't work out for you. Maybe you missed a few chances, you couldn't create a few goals. The game kind of just passed you by. Fair enough, right? You have those games. But for you to go through 90 minutes, and the fact he even played 90 minutes, I don't even understand that. Bukayo Saka was miles better than him, yet Bukayo Saka was hooked off for Jared Bowen, and I believe the 70th minute, Wow, Phil Foden played the full 90 despite being arguably the worst player on the field. But the question is, why is Phil Foden even playing on the left-hand side? No, it's because of a guy called Jude Bellingham. This guy is playing number 10. He had an incredible season in Real Madrid, and now Phil Foden is having to play somewhere else. Now, I've heard everyone say it. Phil Foden cannot play in number 10 because Jude Bellingham is there. Why can't Jude Bellingham play number 8? I've heard this so many times that Jude Bellingham can't play number 8. He can't play number 8. He can't play number 8. Where did this idea come from that Jude Bellingham cannot play number 8? He literally played number 8 at Dortmund. He played number 8 at Birmingham. He's going to play number 8 next season at Real Madrid because Kylian Mbappe is coming in. So they're going to have a 3-man front line. So then why can we not just play Jude Bellingham in number 8 next to Declan Rice? I don't really understand it because they say that you're going to take away from his game. Of course, you're going to limit Bellingham's game, his attacking game especially. But I believe that Jude Bellingham is a better center midfielder than Phil Foden is a left winger. By you putting Phil Foden on left wing, he's not going to have an impact on the game. But putting Jude Bellingham in center midfield, he's still going to have an impact on the game. So you might as well just play him there. Now, of course, it's either you do that or you remove Foden from the team or you remove Bellingham. But that's never going to happen with the way his PR is moving. You got to remove one of them. You can't keep both of them in the team because one is doing well and the other isn't. And some people believe that if you put Foden in number 10, Bellingham won't do well, which is just, I don't believe he's going to do well there. Like, it's Jude Bellingham. His arsenal is so wide. We saw it in the game as well. When Serbia were applying a lot of pressure on England and England weren't able to spring forward as much, Jude Bellingham was tucking in next to Declan Rice. He was coming deep. He was receiving balls from the defenders. He was spraying balls left and right because he was not able to go forward as much. So why would he not be able to do that from a starting position? This entire Phil Foden scenario, this entire Phil Foden, Jude Bellingham debacle, if it was a top manager at England, he would probably solve this. But I think the best solution really, scrap this, forget all this, trying to shoehorn your best players into the same team. If you're not going to actually play Phil Foden in his best position and then accommodate for Jude Bellingham, because right now we're accommodating for Jude Bellingham. Why? I don't know why. Phil Foden is a better number 10 than Jude Bellingham, but I know some of you guys will hate me in the comments for that. But he is. In my opinion, he is a better number 10 than Jude Bellingham because Jude Bellingham is a number 8 who has been good in number 10. And lastly, we move on to the hosts. The host, Germany, who seem to have something really good going on. Now, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Of course, it's Scotland. This is not a great team that they beat. And frankly, I was very disappointed with Scotland. I know you're playing the host team. I know it's the opening game of the tournament. I know they were the major underdogs going into the game. But for you to come out of that game with 0 shots, create no chances in that entire game, literally give Manuel Neuer nothing to do the entire game, that really rubbed me off the wrong way. As I said before, they were not expected to win the game, but you got to give a bit more than that, especially in the tournament. This is your first major tournament in, I believe, 40, 50 years, and that's how you kick it off. It was pretty bad, but maybe it's a testament more to how good Germany are. And this is a Germany team that I was so impressed with so many things that they did, and particularly Nagelsmann's setup. We saw Toni Kroos dropping deep with the center backs, Jonathan Tah and Antonio Rudiger, playing balls as we always see it. 102 passes, 101 completed, 99% accuracy. We've all heard the statistics. Ilkay Gundogan ahead of him playing in that sort of attacking but also not the number 10 role. He was incredible. He was just controlling the game throughout. He had the anchor behind him and Robert Andrich, who was very close to getting a red card. And then you have the number 10s ahead of Ilkay Gundogan, who were just... You see, honestly, these guys, they're very good. And see, I'm of the belief that Florian Wirtz is better than Musiala. I might be part of a very small contingent that believes that. But Musiala moved me. Musiala moved me in that game. He, as I said in the last segment, in these sort of games, in these sort of tournaments, you just have to turn up. It doesn't matter who you're playing. It doesn't matter about the manager. It doesn't matter about anything that's going on. Turn up. Turn up and show your level. And Musiala did that. Man of the match, deservedly so. Picking up incredible positions across the field. His dribbling is this kid. His dribbling is off the charts. Florian Wirtz adopting positions as well. It's very difficult to actually try and man mark 2 free roaming number 10s. But of course, the width that they surrender was adopted by the 2 wing backs. The Stuttgart wing back, I can't remember his name. It can't come off the top of my head. I believe it's Mittelstadt. I might be getting that wrong. And then on the right hand side, Joshua Kimmich, who was pinging in balls throughout the game. And as I said before the tournament, Kai Havertz, goal and assist on the night. He was eating good. He's going to be eating good all tournament. If he's in the right positions, he doesn't even have to do anything. When you got two freaks like Musiala and Vert behind him, creating for him throughout the tournament, I thoroughly expect this guy to have a very, very good tournament. But honestly, Toni Kroos was getting all the plaudits as that's expected. This is his last tournament. He's a all-timer of the game. But Ilkay Gundogan really, really showed me that he is still incredible. I think a lot of people have forgotten how good he is, especially because he's been in a pretty lackluster Barcelona side. But this guy's still good as ever, man. Controlled the game in that middle park. It was kind of in like segments. You had the back three of Kroos, Tah, Rudiger. Then you had, I wouldn't even call it a double pivot, a single pivot in front of those three in Robert Andrich. And then one midfielder in front of him in Ilkay Gundogan. Two number 10s behind Kai Havertz, and then your wingers. So sort of like a 3-3-1-3. It was a very complex and intricate system from Nagelsmann, and we become accustomed to this throughout his career, the weird formations, the weird patterns that he plays, and I think his adaptability is going to be really useful in the bigger games against much better teams. But one thing that I was very, very concerned about, of course, Scotland didn't take advantage of this because they're not good enough to. No offense to my Scottish fans, but the way in which Rudiger and Jonathan Tah were essentially left by themselves for most of the game. Now, of course, this might be because Germany don't really respect Scotland as an opposition, but if I see a team like Portugal with people like Leao, or France with Mbappe, or even Ousmane Dembele, or England with Saka, and I'm looking at those two center backs who are basically back there on their own, that might be a point to actually tinker with, because in transition, that might be a very, very, very bad mistake waiting to happen. But other than that, very routine for Germany. As I said, I'm not going to get too ahead of myself, but this is a very interesting setup from Nagelsmann that I think could take them all the way. As we said before, Germany are probably the favorites for this tournament, especially being at home. But as I said with Spain, they play like a club side. This Germany team are playing like a club side. The setup, the pressing, the relationships. This is a very good blueprint for Julian Nagelsmann. But of course, you guys should let me know down in the comment section down below what you think were the main takeaways from the tournament. Obviously, I'm not going to be talking about every single game from the match day. There was the incredible Romania result. I told you guys Dennis Mann is someone to look out for. This kid is good. Barnabas Vargas scored as Switzerland beat Hungary, as Brillon Bolo made his 4-year appearance once again, despite the fact nobody knows where he actually plays for his club side. But the European Championships is just kicking off. I'm going to hopefully touch on most teams throughout the tournament. But as I said, any main takeaways you took out, any big points that you thought that I missed out on, or even in these points that I've mentioned today, let me know down in the comment section below. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. I appreciate every single one of you. Honestly, from the bottom of my heart, it means so much for me. As always, it's au revoir from me. Take care of yourselves.